from the spark under red, white, and blue lights. Forge my own path, climbing these brand new heights. This ain't a debate, we setting the new standard. The voice of the free, a vision that's expanded. Drew Grimaldi Podcast. Drew Grimaldi Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Drew Grimaldi Podcast. We have a very, very special guest with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Rick Weible is with us again today. How are we doing?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the last name is Weible, but don't worry about that.
Sorry.
I'm used to it. It's Weeble's Wobbles. They don't fall down. And then, of course, with a great name like Ricky, my mom totally cursed me. And when that song came out, Ricky, don't lose her number. What did you expect was going to happen?
Well, with the last name like Grimaldi, I apologize because that is, you get the telephone calls from people trying to sell shit. Oh, Mr. Grimaldi. Like, it's not even an N in there. Well, I appreciate you coming on. So how are things going with how are things going with the campaign and everything?
It's going really well, and now with the addition of a lieutenant governor now, things are changing dramatically because now the campaign has added somebody that has been about integrity of how Minnesota spends its money, and then also election integrity, but the fraud in Minnesota. So Philip Parrish joins the campaign with extensive research and a military background of Navy intelligence. So nothing is going to get around this campaign whatsoever. The fraud is done. And between Mike Lindell's understanding of deviations and numbers, right, and then with Philip's Parrish tenacity, it's game over for the fraudsters. So it's time for people to support the campaign, get involved, and especially when J.D. Vance basically came to Minnesota and said, oh, by the way, here's the bombshell, the criminal referrals. That just ignited gasoline on the campaign. And so the Minnesota is abuzz right now, and there have been parades out there that the team has been involved in, and the response has been incredible.
That's amazing. So, right now I've been hearing that you have different things. So, like, Michigan GOP is one of the weakest things, one of the weakest organizations I think I've seen, in terms of organizing. But from what I hear, too, there's been some bullshit with the Minnesota GOP that they've been, doing some shifting around and whatnot. Has that been the case?
Oh, yeah. So let's just set the stage. Okay, so the GOP wanted to use clickers in their convention. And so you have the owner of the company there of the clickers along with his staff. And on the first day, there were questions. So this was on Friday. And so there were huge deviations between the different elections, if you will. And people were kind of suspicious, and people were wondering, hey, and they were asking questions. Hey, is my clicker working? And they were assured, yes, things are working. So then Saturday rolls around where the governor selection is. Now, I don't have to state for the audience that Mike Lindell is against the machines. Oh, and absolutely. There's even the funny video with Jimmy Kimmel. Go look this up where he's inside of one of the toy claw things. Yep. And he even says that's rigged. So he's consistent regarding machines without the proper oversight.
And I appreciate consistency. That consistency means it's real, that they're very passionate about it. But
right. And then you get somebody like Philip Parrish, who by his very nature is he embodies Missouri's ethos, which is the show me state. Show me it actually works. Show me the evidence, that kind of stuff. So when you have these clickers, and we were asked, who was a vendor, we'd like to kind of see this ahead of time, make sure everything's on the up and up. What are some of the issues that could happen? But no, they didn't want to give us the vendor, of course. And so we didn't have a chance to really preview these as a campaign to kind of say, hey, what's going on here? Well, during the multiple rounds during the governor's selection, we see deviations kind of with the vote totals. Now, Mike was in third place, and then with the rules, Mike would be automatically eliminated in subsequent rounds. So after the fifth round, we start kind of throwing our support behind Kendall Qualls, who isn't a bad guy. He's not a politician. And so, we said, let's just have our delegation go ahead and support Qualls for the party nomination versus Lisa Dameth, especially when she was the Speaker of the House and the fraud wasn't really nipped in the bud.
Right.
So, and I'll explain more on that later if you'd like. Now, so Mike goes with that plan, and our delegation then moves over to Kendall, and now all of a sudden he's the first place. But then there's all these missing votes, and they're wondering what's going on. So they pause and they try to investigate for about 2.5 hours what's going on. And there were subsequent votes in between that where they were trying to go to hand count, and it was declined twice. They considered it. So they finally were able to continue on the convention, and through the 10th ballot, finally Kendall Qualls captures the nomination. But before this, both Lisa and Kendall were abiding candidates, which meant that if they lost the nomination of the party, they wouldn't continue going on into the primary. Lindell was one of the honest candidates, along with Parrish, that said, look, we're driving by to the convention. We're going to stop by, and if you're willing to endorse us, we'll take that with us. But we are telling you up front, we are going to go to the primary election. So Mike was very honest about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the difference. Well, then, of course, it didn't go Lisa's way when she was in the lead the first through fifth ballot, but then when it flips to where Kendall's now in the lead, of course there was something wrong, and now she became an election denier and an antitrust machine right out of the gate, and starts using Mike's good name to basically go, and my good friend Mike Lindell, and so I call Mike and I'm like, so is there something to this that you're now besties with Lisa?
Something you're not telling me?
Absolutely not. It was so funny. I had to call him immediately because he had left the building at that point.
See, that's why you got to love the politician. You get these people where it's like in today's TV age, right? It's not like the old days where you could say one thing to one crowd, one something to another, but you would see this, like Kamala Harris, all these people, they would tell a different story to a different thing. And I think that is the biggest thing, is consistency, like you said. It's like people talk about Donald Trump. He said the same thing about Iran since the 80s.
Yeah. Right. And it's on video, which is great. It's so perfect. And so Lion Lisa, she goes up to Alex Plekesh, who's the party chair, and asks for a basically bypass of the commitment and signed agreement that she had with the party about abiding by the endorsing. So Alex Plekesh gives her an out, basically, but he doesn't have the authority to do it. So now the saga continues that the personnel committee has met, the state exec has met. Now you have other delegates going after Alex for giving her this bypass. She then runs to file for office because Tuesday at 5 p.m. A week and a half ago was basically the deadline to file. So she ends up filing, and now she's in the primary along with Kendall, along with Mike, and a few other stragglers. And it's absolutely incredible. So now you have this divided setup, and this is exactly what we wanted, because pre-convention, we had a survey done, a poll done by Big Data, and they showed that Lindell was in the lead. And so by having Lisa and Kendall in, this creates a clear pathway for Mike to win the primary election. And so so it's just like we basically kind of dropped the bomb, where we just exposed the corruption of the GOP and the swamp creatures all in one fell swoop. And we kind of knew that even if Kendall would get the endorsement, because of the money that the side PACs have raised for Lisa and her own campaign, just sitting on money, they weren't going to just sit on $1.5 million. There's just no way. They weren't going to exit. And so as I'm talking to Lindell about this on the floor, I'm just like, there's no way she abides by this. It's just common sense. She's going to get so many calls from her supporters to go in, and I don't blame her, but she should have just been honest from up front. And this is one of those things where, because the endorsing convention is here at the end of May, and the election for the primary isn't until August 11th, it doesn't work out. And so the reality is, when you have somebody like Lindell, who is outraised the next 5 candidates combined,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, of course Lindell isn't going to just sit there and go, uncle, and I'm going to abide by
just
a
drop out.
pay-to-play system of the convention where normal delegates weren't able to attend. So if you couldn't afford the $200 entry fee to basically pay to vote, and then to go all the way up to Duluth and then pay another $250 a night to basically stay overnight. I mean, if you had, you'd be looking at a minimum of $500 to attend, more than likely $1,000 to be able to cast a vote. And so this is where we early on looked at this, and I told Mike, it's like, I'm sorry, but that's not the real Minnesotans. The delegates are a subset, but because they're exclusive, now it's a normal Minnesotans may be struggling and may not have the finances to do this type of convention. Why are we doing this? It's almost like a poll tax that you're better off just going straight to the primary, because that's where you're going to have everyday Minnesotans who are aware of what's going on in the fraud in Minnesota. And so, and that raises a larger question. So is Lisa, is she vulnerable? Absolutely she is.
Yeah.
And here's why. So she's sitting there on this campaign trail saying how she has created this Office of Inspector General. Well, okay.
What has it done to get the fraud?
Yeah, and here's the problem. It doesn't start until January 1, 2027, no. Even though the fiscal period starts July 2026. But then the enforcement part and the legal enforcement doesn't start until January 1, 2028. So when you already have...
So that's like $20 billion out the door before they start doing anything.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of like, hey, Democrats, if we win this, here's your escape clause, because we don't actually start looking at it until January after the new governorship starts and the new House and Senate. So this gives you time that if you lose in November, you've got almost 2 months to shred everything, right? Right. And then on top of that, you've got another year to leave the state, so that way we don't have jurisdictional oversight of you.
Right.
You know, so it's just like you literally just map this out for them. Then on top of it, it's duplicative because you already had this House Oversight Committee, this fraud committee that doesn't have subpoena power. We learned that with the Omar investigation.
Right, yeah.
She just said, go pound sand. But
she gives the world the finger. I mean, the United States, it's like, you know, she has done some egregious things. And she just walks and smiles.
She won the award as like one of the best Somali representatives in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, she's award winning, and the other beauty of this too is that on the Senate side, you have a legislative auditor who's done a great job over there. But so if you've already got these two committees that are standing, why not just give them legal authority now for subpoena power and referral and criminal oversight?
Right.
Why did we have to wait? Yeah, why do we have to wait until 2028? You already so you're creating this duplicative service that has, and you're just wasting everybody's time and money. And so this was my angst against Lisa, and I was talking to Mike about this before Saturday in the war room, and I'm like, you got to add this into your speech. You know, let's think about this. And then we were like, okay, where do we want to tell our delegates to go? Do we want to just have them not endorse anyone and kind of go to the convention for no endorsement? I'm like, no. Let's see if Kendall will get endorsed. That way he has the support of the party. And then Lisa doesn't have the support of the party. She'll go into the primary. We create this three-way grenade out there, and then just allow the delegates to kind of have their heads explode, and then force the entire party to kind of break up in essence, because BPOU chairs and county chairs, they can only remain in power if they're going to support the endorsed candidates. So this creates all this cascading resignations of people who want to support Mike, who want to support Lisa Dameth, and then the people who are left behind are supporting Kendall. Well, the party doesn't have money. Kendall doesn't really have that much money. We have a huge momentum for us to be able to fundraise with a Bedminster event.
Now, let me ask you this. Is there a big, in Minnesota with you guys for the governor's race, is there a big gap between the fundraising for like Democrats and the Republicans? Like what is that gap? How outraised are the Democrat versus Republican in this?
So I would say overall, right now it's about 10-1 Democrat to Republican fundraising when you take everything in. And then as the timeline continues across, it will probably be at about 15-1. It could climb up to 20-1. So the closer that Lindell becomes a threat towards the general, we will see all hands on deck. And let's not forget the former party chair of Minnesota is currently the chair of the DNC federally. And so
there's a lot of money,
yeah, so it is about money, and he's not going to want to lose his home state. The Democrats cannot have more negative news coming across from Minnesota, from Michigan, from California.
Right.
There is such a wealth of fraud that will be investigated, and so this is where we have to make sure that with Lindell Parish that they really put the pedal to the metal to expose it for what it is. And
so how do you overcome this funding gap? Because like in Michigan, we had, Tooney, for example, who was outraised and said 11-1. And I never saw a single Tooney ad while he was running for state Senate in the state of Michigan. What would you say to somebody like that? Like, how do you overcome that funding gap? I'm curious. What would you...
So part of the funding is about fraud, and it's about shifting money between organizations. So not all of it is real. And so when you see some of this Democrat stuff, it's like, okay, are they actually buying signs? Are they buying ads? Is it really real, or is it to pay off people, or is it just pocketing money to the consultants? What's going on here? And so this is where so it's not about raising money. It's about using the money that you have effectively. And this is one of the rare elements of Lindell. When you have a candidate that already has 9 million followers, it's easy to do the ask. Just like, please support Mike Lindell at mikelindellgov.com. Please support, $10, $50, whatever it is. That helps get material out to voters who don't know that Mike Lindell is running, because right now the Star Tribune certainly isn't on our side to tell voters and their subscribers that, hey, there's this alternative universe. No, they've actually covered up the fraud, and they've done so badly that their readership has declined that they have actually transferred some of their employees to Iowa. What, they don't want to support the Democrats anymore and pay the fees that they basically told the voters to go, support these endorsed candidates from the paper. And now they're kind of looking to sell themselves to another buyer. It's gotten so bad. And it's like, so luckily, social media, I think, is going to be the key. With X now being unlocked, people like you, people like me, Mike Lindell with his 9 million followers through all different platforms, I think the reach is much further, because the younger generation, they're not sitting down and watching traditional news anymore. And so advertising on traditional TV channels isn't the way to go. Right. But the social media, the text messages, small postcards, that kind of stuff, and then the relationship building. And also,
do you think door-to-door knocking is really effective?
I think it is in some cases, because there are people who want to have a piece of literature dropped off to them, and they may want to talk and ask the question or two of the campaign, where does Mike stand on this? And so being able to create that connection, yes, it's important. And so so we have to it's kind of like people's love language. People have a political language as well. Right. And so we have to kind of fire on all those cylinders. So some people want to be at a meet and greet. Some people just want a TV commercial. Some people want a radio ad. Some people want a TV ad. Some people want a social media informative. Some people want your website or a card handed to them that they can just kind of read, what are your top 10? Right. And so all of those are impactful. And so as debates happen, forums, I think this creates a nice, unique piece that the Republican Party could actually create excitement in Minnesota, and I would encourage them to do so. If you are a BPOU, even though you have Kendall Qualls as your endorsed candidate, but Lisa has now this escape clause, I think there should be more debates between the three candidates and other candidates so that we do get the Republican message out, because Republicans need to be united about the idea of stopping the fraud and lowering taxes and unleashing the business potential in Minnesota, to the deregulation, everything. And I think that positive message will help all candidates, but it will allow the voters in the primary election to kind of say, we believe this person is our best marketer and our best leader. And of course, Mike Lindell is the top marketer in Minnesota as a candidate.
Absolutely.
And I think with
he's
the
fantastic.
leadership skills, and with the leadership skills that he has of Lindell TV, My Pillow, Cause of America, Offense Fund, Defense Fund, and the Recovery Network, I don't know who else there is.
Right. So in your opinion, how deep do you think our friend Ilhan Omar is in this fraud scandal? She obviously was caught, trying to funnel money to some of those programs that have now been, found out to be very fraudulent. Do you think that she knows exactly what's going on? Or do you think that what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to slice the apple here. I think there's a certain perspective that she knew and directed traffic, but I think her husband also played a significant role. And I'm aware that it wasn't just contained within Minnesota, because during the 2020 election in South Dakota, I knew both of them were invested in some of the marijuana programs in South Dakota. And so, especially the recreational, and when that was held up in court and then re-voted on in 2022, because it passed in 2020, but in 2022, the vote went the other way. And so they lost significant money in South Dakota in their investments and the fraud that they were trying to do in South Dakota affecting that vote, but also in the investment in some of the distilleries that they were looking at trying to do. And so I think if you were to look around, I don't think she's limited to just Minnesota. I think her reach is more dynamic than people would expect.
So interesting. So you think that spider web goes a lot further than Minnesota?
I believe it does, and I believe she's involved in other states. I think when we look at kind of her wine product, that is another canary in the coal mine of investigation that needs to be
100%. To go from 36 million to I only make 100 and some thousand a year.
Right.
That's an accounting error. Something not right there. That would spark an IRS audit on like 90% of the population.
Right.
I don't know. It's just one of those things. So let me ask you this. So we just witnessed one of the craziest things ever. I think it was Spencer Pratt in LA and with Hilton out there. He was running for governor. We saw the same thing that we saw in 2020. The same feeling. I had like PTSD coming back to this because it was like watching 2020 again. And the statistics of the whole thing didn't make sense. So you had Spencer Pratt come out. He's, number 2 on election night, along with Karen Bass, which made no sense. But then, days after the election, we saw all these ballots come in, and they didn't go for Bass, which was weird because you had a certain percentage that were going for Bass originally, and then once the election stopped, all of the ballots that came in didn't have Bass, but they had the, Cynthia Rahman, whatever her name is, and then all of a sudden, less Spencer Pratt, and then all of a sudden she moved into the 2 spot. So it was like days after the election we saw this. What do you think happened there?
I'm gonna use common sense here. I believe that was considerable election fraud perpetrated by multiple actors that are only on one side of the aisle. And so I don't want to just say it's the Democrats, because I think there's other groups and unions that are involved in this and other PACs that were there filling out absentee ballots after the election and dropping them off because California allows for, it's got to be with 5 days or so after the election for these absentee ballots to keep coming in. It's one of the most ridiculous things, and the Supreme Court should have resolved this. And as a matter of fact, the Senate should have passed the SAVE Act to cut this garbage out. And the reality is that you're sitting there finding news articles now that the homeless were paid to vote in this as well. And then we're seeing all of this evidence come out, and it's just like we as a country cannot survive with this. And we saw this in 2024 as well, where the Republicans were in the lead for many of these House races, and all of a sudden they lost. Because of the scheme with the additional absentee ballots only going one direction. So this is where Lindell is absolutely right. the devil gets greedy and overplays his hand and just make sure that all of the ballots went one direction. None of the other ballots went for Bass. None of the other ones went for Pratt. No, they just all mysteriously all went to one area. Right. So this is where the devil is in the details, where this is absolutely an anomaly and a deviation that Lindell would basically say, aha, that needs to be looked into and that needs to be curtailed. You and I both know through common sense that it ain't right.
Right. You could watch it and you just know it's not right. And the thing is that, you know, I'm on Twitter. I'm active on Twitter, always talking shit to libs, you know. And I get a lot of these people saying, they're like, well, you know, first, you know, we were given shit. Hey, it shouldn't take 30 days. It should take a month to count ballots. They're like, well, it didn't take days. Okay, it shouldn't take a week. Okay, well, it took a day less than a week. Whatever. The fact of the matter is that mail-in ballots, and especially in California, but you brought up the homeless thing, but essentially you have these ballot harvesting things. For people that don't understand ballot harvesting, people go out and they collect people's ballots for them and drop them off. So what these people are caught doing in California is going to their homeless population. Why have the Democrats never solved their homeless population problem? Well, because they can use the homeless to go sign up for a mail-in ballot, especially in places like California. They have to use somebody's address. They use the person who is ballot harvesting. Well, then all of a sudden, what happens to that ballot every single election after that? It comes to the ballot harvester's house, because they mail out ballots to everybody out there. It is the least secure election process in the country. And they got caught doing that. And I'm just blown away that more people are just not like, this is wrong. This is not correct.
Well, here's why. Because the Democrats, they love power, and this is one of the creative things that they've done. They legalized fraud. So it's not illegal to do these activities. So when voters, like common sense people like you and I, we look at this and it's just like, well, that's illegal, right? Well, no. They allow it in these blue states.
Correct.
And so this is why it's so important that we have to look at the laws in each of the states to understand the board game as conservatives and Republicans to figure out, okay, A, do we have to play by those rules? Or are there avenues that we can prevent some of this gamesmanship? Or do we have to somehow figure out a way to get into power or create lawsuits to stop these activities and to basically go in? And so the decision before the U.S. Supreme Court right now and what they just experienced in California, it is going to be very interesting to see how they define what election day is.
Right.
Because is this going to end absentee voting for many of the states, but keep UCOVA voting out there for military and overseas personnel intact? But for the states regarding federal elections, they're going to say, you're done. Now, this could create a two-tier election system. Number one, you could have a federal ballot that is you have to show up and vote on election day.
Right.
Then you may actually end up with a state ballot that could still have the old rules with the early absentee. And so this, I think, is going to be a significant battle between and a discussion further of how do we secure our elections and where do state rights begin and end? Mm-hmm. Because this is those are going to be the two decisions: secure elections or states' rights.
Right. I agree. And then, you know, the same thing too is in California, they don't require ID to vote. And some of the items that they will take so that somebody can vote in California to register to vote is a gym card, prescription label on medication. I mean, what the fuck are we talking about here? How is this okay?
It's actually bad in almost all the states. So you think it's great here in South Dakota where we say we have voter ID. Did you realize in South Dakota you can self-sign an affidavit to say I am who I am? You don't need a witness.
That's wild.
And then in Minnesota, you can be somebody where you can come in and vouch for up to 8 other people who don't have IDs. However, Minnesota law is so funny that you take that 8 and you tip it on its side and you get the infinity mark, right? Well, that infinity mark is good for people who work at shelters, homeless shelters, mental institutions, nursing homes, etc. Those people in those professional services can vouch for unlimited people in their care.
Oh, and the nursing home thing's a scam too. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about these scammers that go after and prey on elderly. The Democrats are doing it for their ballots. going into these things, and they're just doing the same thing. Oh yeah, well, come in here, we can turn that in for you. They have no
Yeah.
fucking clue what's going on with the election. They could tell them who to vote for. They could be like, "Oh yeah, I'll fill it in."
And we saw that in the Wisconsin videos during the 2020 election that came out, and we see that in Minnesota as well. And now in Minnesota, in other states, they have now made it a requirement that the auditors send people to the nursing homes to actually go in and ballot harvest. And typically the Republicans are not told, and they don't have representation there to make sure that the elections are on the up and up. And so you typically have these unionized officials that only donate to one side of the aisle doing this ballot harvesting, being paid by the county to do these activities.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. I mean, and it's disgusting too. And then, to top the whole thing off with, with their fraud, they're, not only do they not require ID, you have all of this. Then with the mail-in ballots, they allow them to be postmarked. So you have, if they come in after election day, as long as the label says that it was sent on election day, they're going to count it. And you guarantee you get somebody that works in the office, they're going to post date that. We saw that in 2020. They were said, oh, yeah, we want to make sure all the ballots count. So we heard about the election people going in there and stamping them, post-stamping them, just so the ballots could get in 2020.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And, of course, when the polls close at 7 or 8 o'clock, depending on your state, you can typically go to an international airport where there's a postal service that's open 24 hours. So you have from 8 until midnight to run your extra ballots over there to that location, and then they're required, as soon as they receive it, to postmark it based upon the date that it was received. So you could drop off tens of thousands of ballots, and they'll sit there in the back room and postmark them with the date, even if it takes them a couple of days, and it will meet the state statutes. Yeah. And so this is why it's so important to say that the ballots, like in South Dakota, we have it in law that they have to be received at a certain time before the polls close. Otherwise, they're rejected. And so we've run into that in South Dakota where people were trying to bring ballots in after the polls had closed, and they were bringing in thousands of ballots. And luckily, because of our state law, our volunteers were able to stop that and report it to the auditor and have the auditor quarantine those ballots but not count them.
So then you also have in California, this was the one I almost forgot for a second, but I saw on Twitter that a lot of Spencer Pratt people, you had Gavin Newsom, who signed a law that relaxed the signature verification. Yeah. A lot of people on Twitter are now saying that they were getting their Spencer Pratt ballots back, saying that it was rejected because they couldn't match the signature verification.
Right.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's like laws for them to weaken, but then we're on a separate area. And so there are a lot of issues here that we are now becoming aware of in multiple states, and there's already a lawsuit filed in Minnesota to try and protect the elections here regarding the early voting, that there aren't election judges from both parties equally represented during the now 2 weeks before the election to have the polls open. And the Republicans are not being represented. Not a single one has really been hired in Hennepin County. And so there's a case that was just filed on Friday, or I'll say last week, that has popped up that Minnesota Voter Alliance has put out there. And so I think we're going to see more of these activities across the United States for the remaining primaries and the general elections, because the legislature's failed us. The Senate has failed us so far with the SAVE Act. And so we are left with Trump's executive orders to try and protect us. But it's going to be incumbent upon the candidates to raise extra money, especially the statewide candidates, Congress, whether you're in a congressional district or a Senate race or a governor race, you're going to have money. You're going to have to raise money to fight for your elections, to fight for your people's rights, to make sure that they have their votes counted. Otherwise, if you don't, you've just lost your election. I'll just say it straight out.
Right. 100%. 100%. So let me ask you this. If you were in charge of LA elections, you had said, and you still say, I can't count the ballots, right? Yep. So let me ask you this question, because this would be one I think that a lot of Democrats would come up. I think it's a good question. How do you scale something like that, especially, for hand counting? that's one thing that the hand counting, things help with, is counting them quickly. How do you scale, for example, like a national vote for mail-in, or not for mail-in, but for hand counting? Like, how would you scale something like that, I guess would be my question.
It's actually really easy, and luckily we have the foundation, because let's think about what we did 100 years ago. Obviously, there were no machines, and we had to hand count.
True.
And so the original laws that we can see is that they hand counted in the precincts. So each of the precincts was about 2,000 people or less. And so that's how you scale it, is you get back to the precincts, get rid of these vote centers where you have people voting all over the county, get back to the precinct where elections are local. And we were actually able to have election night results when we were at the precinct level. They would just call in what their votes were, or send it via telegraph, whatever they had to do to get those vote totals in to the county, then to the Secretary of State. And so within the county, they had their election results before midnight for the entire county. And then the next day, it was the Pony Express that was basically riding out from the counties to the Secretary of States at the state capitals to basically give those results. And so the papers were there right away to basically publish those results statewide. It wasn't rocket science. Right. It was pretty easy. And so a lot of those press folks were sitting there at the county. And so those county newspapers were telling you who was voted mayor, who was voted within the legislature, all of that. So it wasn't anything mysterious.
Right.
And so the evidence is already there in the old statutes of hand counting in the precincts. And now we've just kind of perfected it better with different hand count solutions that are out there. There's over 8 different ones out there. And we have one over at uscase.org where you can download the materials, and you can download the spreadsheets, and you can alter them however you need to put the candidate names in, and it's all free. And so it's not rocket science.
Right.
And so whereas machine companies are out there making money on their counting system, US Case is a nonprofit and not making money on it.
I've been to that. I hear so like with you, like you do a lot of teaching, coaching, for local election stuff like that. What type of things do you teach in these for like poll watchers? Like, what do they look out for example?
Oh yeah, so depending on the situation, first thing I look for is when you are there at the precinct level, you want to make sure people don't have pens in their pockets like this, because let's think about the first stage, the absentee balloting that's coming in and being mailed in. So if somebody has a pen right here and it's black or blue, that is a red flag right out of the gate. Absentee workers should only be working with either a red pen or a green pen, so it's easily identifiable when they're doing initials and verifications. Because what's one of the issues that somebody could do? They could literally take a pen and just go ahead and mark their thumb. And so as they're starting to handle ballots, they can hit the other ovals to basically invalidate the votes that you have for a candidate.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So that's number one. And so make sure that when you are observing people, you don't have little dots like that on their fingers, that they are potentially using that as they're handling ballots to invalidate your votes. And so having somebody there by themselves without proper supervision, always assume that they're doing something dirty.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So now that you've just seen that example, you're just like
crazy.
Your mind is just blown, right?
Yeah.
And so when you see election results that don't show you the overvotes, suspect there's fraud there.
Right.
Because the overvotes are caused by either folds, the voters doing pen marks, like little tapping, or trying to do eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or somebody that's done this, or folds going across the ballot. So we have to investigate all overvotes to figure out where that's coming from. And the other thing too is you don't want somebody there alone at a table by themselves. And if you see them filling out ballots and then tossing other ones, well, wait a minute. Who was the other person to verify that they were marking the ballots correctly so that they could compare them? Because that is probably a Democrat switching votes right there live in front of you if you don't have two people sitting there. Or in conservative districts, it could be a conservative wiping out Democrat votes. So
we saw that in 2020 too. When they kicked out all the poll watchers or all the Republicans, and they just had Democrats in there. And people were like, well, what does it matter? They stop the... Well, they said that they stopped the counting, and there's still ballots being counted. What the hell's going on?
Right. And so that's another key is, so like if they say that they're done, but not everybody leaves, that means they're not done. They're about to do something else. So now they're going into the next phase. Whenever you don't have public oversight of an election process, suspect everything and anything could go on.
Oh, absolutely.
The public. So when many state laws out there say the count shall be public, we have to take a step back and look at what was it like 100 years ago. We could actually be in the room, and you actually see newspaper reports of this where you would actually have the reporter talk about the environment and how everybody was gathered around, how many other people were there, witnessing the counting of the ballots, even the description of the weather, all of that stuff, and then how they boxed everything up. Well, that's what we expect. And so when we get to these machines and they say the count is public, well, do you understand how the machine interpreted that ballot? Did you actually see the ballots? Did you understand how it was interpreting that? When we see hand counting, we hear how they're interpreting each of the ballots, and we can be close enough to actually see the ballots themselves to make sure that they are correct. Well, with a machine, it's just going in and we're not seeing that. And so we're removing that. The other part of this is logic and accuracy testing. There's supposed to be a public test available for your precinct or even at the county site for the absentee ballots. One of the things that we see in many of the laws is that they hardly give you notice. They limit the notice as to how it goes out, like how lazy it is. Like it can just be on their website, it can be on their front door, it can be at the county office, etc. And so you have to have teams be aware of that, and you should have your county chairs for your parties be engaged in sending emails so that they can let their delegation and candidates know when these are going to be, and we should be attending those. And we should be making sure that on every single position in contest, that let's say for governor's race and you have 4 candidates, you should make sure that those 4 candidates have unique numbers. If they have a 0, that means they didn't actually test whether the machine worked or not. If all of the candidates have the same number, then you didn't protect against vote flips. So it's those simple things that we need to be able to analyze and look at. Now, you'll have many states that will gaslight you and say the cast vote records don't exist. They actually do. It's a requirement since 2005 on all of these things. And so that cast vote record and ballot image is a copy of the ballot that it's scanned, and then a result file as 2 separate PDFs that shows you how this ballot over here, how it interpreted each of those votes. And so seeing those together, you can actually quickly review to see are there issues. And they should be testing at least 20 ballots that are folded and running those through the machines, and they should all come back blank, because if they don't, that means the folds could be traversing an oval, causing an issue.
That's amazing. There's so many things out there with that. I mean, and then,
right.
Like what type of thing do you think they were, in that process counting the votes in LA? How do you think they, all of a sudden Pratt jumped up or, dropped like he did, and Cynthia Rahman moved up? Do you think that they were doing stuff like that in those ballot centers?
I think it's even worse. I think they were even they had other groups out there pre-inject ballots that were on the way to going for this other candidate. And so obviously there was a group behind this third place candidate that's now in second place, where the city council member, where she has support there that wanted to push her over there to make sure that Pratt was out. And so that way, if it's found out that Bass has so much corruption assigned to her, they have the next person that's a little cleaner to be brought forth.
Right. Oh, that's so disgusting. So yeah, just disgusting. So let me ask you this. So in 2016, you famously hacked the no ink poll pad. Walk us through, what happened that day and exactly what you found.
Yeah, so this was while I was mayor for the city of St. Bonifacius, and this was during when Minnesota was doing testing to determine whether or not they wanted to go forward with them. So Hennepin County was selected to use no ink poll pads instead of the old paper reams. And so this was early on when they had the Verizon Jetpack cellular routers that the poll pads were to connect to. And what was interesting is that way back when, I still had an older iPhone where I could just basically put the name of that Jetpack on there and didn't have a password on my phone. And those iPads were able to connect to my phone, which my laptop was connected to, and I was able to root in to the back end of those poll pads and basically see the entire voter rolls live at the Secretary of State's office.
Wow.
And I was just like, just because I was able to do that, these are not secure at all. We need to make sure that there's hardened security for this. What's interesting is that Apple knew about this vulnerability in 2016, and the fix actually didn't come out until 2023.
Wow.
To basically lock this out. And so it was well known. And so I went to my city council and I said, look, I can't in good faith vote for this test and to have it used in the city of St. Bonifacius. And at the time, the county auditor, Ginny, was just like, well, all the other cities are doing this. You should just follow along. And you actually don't have that decision. Well, in state law at the time, it was the cities that could make the decision, and they were trying to say, no, we didn't have it. So our city attorney wrote them and just said, hey, look, we actually do have the right to basically refuse this. And so our council voted against use of those poll pads in our primary election back in 2016, and we reverted back to the paper ballots. And the same thing, I believe, for the general election as well. And so, and Hennepin County had sent an email, hey, are you willing to kind of help us look into fixing this? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that at all. I don't want to put my company's reputation at risk. I don't want to be involved in this. Is a you problem. And knowing they need to develop this, they have more people, hopefully, than just somebody like me coming in and criticizing them. You know, it's like, here's the information, just go and fix it. And so then that was the last year I was mayor. And then 2018, we moved to South Dakota. And so I was out of the Minnesota politics, you know, at that point.
Were you happy to be done with it, or was it something where you're like,
No, I wasn't. You know, my wife, she wanted me to be out of politics. She didn't want to be in it anymore. And so we moved to South Dakota to kind of be out of it. But then 2020 hit, and my wife looked at me and said,
trying to get out, it just pulls me back in. Go get them.
And then we got involved in the 2022 elections in South Dakota.
Go get them.
Now we're heavily involved again. So
your wife knows you too well. Go get them. I love that.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
I love that. That's funny. Well, let me ask you this. So Trump sent, federal investigators to Los Angeles, to look at the mayoral race. What do you think that they're looking for?
I think they're going to try and figure out what's the source of these ballots. Were these ballots actually from the county or city jurisdictions? Or did these people potentially download the sample ballots to have all the right timing marks? And did they go by the paper? So does the paper match? I don't believe that there's any watermarks on this, but I could be corrected later. I haven't looked at it one way or the other. But I think, let's just use common sense. I think they're trying to determine if everything is on the up and up. And you and I, looking at common sense, think that there's enough there that this belays common sense for this type of volume.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's one of those things where, everybody with a brain looks at it and says, okay, this doesn't make sense. Just because of the statistics, like you said, anybody that knows statistics and knows, differentials and, all of that, the standard deviation, so I would say,
right.
It just didn't make sense because the ballots that came in after Election Day predominantly favored Cynthia Rahman, where the people that came in on Election Day seemed to have favored Karen Bass. And then Cynthia Rahman actually gave a concession speech that they ended up retracting. And then they, the way that they said, well, it wasn't a concession speech. C-SPAN just accidentally called it a concession speech. It was a concession speech. She knew she lost.
She cried, didn't she?
She cried, yeah. She knew she lost, It's not like it's not like it was
those were cheers of joy.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But
so that tells me she probably wasn't involved, or her campaign wasn't involved to tell her, hey, don't go out there. Everything's going to be A-okay. We got this.
She didn't even know.
Obviously, she didn't even know. So that's a clue there. So this is another good reason to investigate. So she may be one of the honest brokers out of this, and there may be some redeeming quality of the California, LA voters, hopefully. But I don't know. Pratt should have won this thing. It should have been an open and shut case. And I love the guy's creativity. But I'm so glad that the feds are looking at this, because let's look at another vector of possibility. Were all of these ballots actually hand marked.
Right.
And so if you take
or they printed off.
Or they printed. And so if they're printed, those are fake. And so you and I both know how to detect.
Yeah, you're going to have the
something
bubble,
that's printed.
The impression.
That's right. You'll have the little bubble impression on the back on an oval. And so if that's not there, that's a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that they'll find those too. Because, I mean, especially just the amount of votes now that they're seeing are returned for Pratt. I mean, there was some nefarious going on there. And I think we all know that. What do you say, what do you say to a Democrat that says this is just California counting their election? It's a normal process.
We cannot survive as a country this way. We cannot have these long voting periods. And it makes sense that we need to know who our voters are. And we need to make sure that the big money is removed. And we need to make sure that the corrupt organizations that are in handling this stuff are gone. This goes back to the old Acorn days.
Amazing. So, to a different topic here altogether. What are your thoughts on the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Oh, thank God they were busted. I mean, can you believe the left was basically, well, actually, maybe we should understand this. So it's the Democrat Party that had the Ku Klux Klan members. So we have this law firm that is so connected to the Democrat Party that is funding today's Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
So we need minorities to wake up. I'm a Hispanic, and I totally understand what's going on. This is why I support the Republicans, because of the individual rights, the ability to self-determination, and limited government. I'm all about that. And so the Democrats, who are basically trying to create this multi-tier system of communism, socialism, and destroy our rights, and to have people basically in feudalism and slavery. These racist pigs who have basically gaslit conservatives, our president, and so many other good Americans over the years, they need to be punished so far into the ground that they never exist. Yeah. And, let's remember the founding of the Republican Party. It was to abolish slavery. And what Lincoln went through to basically have a divided country and to keep that together is absolutely remarkable. And then we go into the 60s, and it was the Republicans voting for civil rights and the Democrats refusing. And so minorities need to understand this history very clearly, and Christians need to basically promote this, to basically say, look, it is time for Christians to get involved with the Republican Party to basically win these elections, because these Democrats, they're promoting evil, and they're allowing all of this fraud across the entire country, and we didn't sign up for this. And so if we remember way back in our history that we were upset about a 3% tax on tea, right, and here we are getting taxed to death right now in our states, our counties, and our federal government, it is an absolute wake-up call. We have drifted so far that it is all hands on deck. Start turning this ship around. And you guys in California, I'm so sorry what you're going through. Yeah. And in Minnesota, these two high tax states, this is so wrong. And these politicians, these swamp creatures, are allowing the theft of your hard-earned money, and it has to stop. And you have to help with that.
Yeah, I agree. I was, watching some of the, the congressional hearing on the Southern Poverty Law, and Jamie Raskin gets up there and says, I don't know what my Republican colleagues don't understand about paid informants. And I'm like, what doesn't he understand? That this is a tax-exempt charity, not the fucking CIA.
Right.
Why are they paying anybody in the KKK? Why are they paying for the robes? Why are they paying for the crosses and the gasoline that they, for their parties and stuff? The Democrat Party that loves the KKK still thinks that black people are too stupid to vote and to get an ID, and then you have Planned Parenthood too, which was started by the same type of people that were trying to kill and get rid of black babies. I don't understand how anybody, any minority, could vote for such an evil party. It blows my mind.
Oh, and on top of that, they are trying to get white liberal women to have their children practice the next generation of eugenics, which is we want to make sure that Whitey is so confused that we are going to change their gender so that we basically sterilize them.
Right.
We're going to have them so confused. I mean, it's just like the Bible teaches us that this kind of stuff is possible and it will happen. And here we are looking at it front and center. It's like, even in Minnesota, they bring in the satanic statue for Christmas.
Yeah, that was
and Governor Walz wins an award from that group and gets a plaque from them. And so when Mike sits there and talks about he's going to go find that statue and throw it out, and then people are like, well, you have to be fair to the devil. What do you mean you have to be fair to the devil? No, we don't.
No, you don't. Yeah. You know, it's just weird. Why would you even want that in your capital?
Right.
You know,
it's just like,
most people would have common sense and be like, okay, this is vandalism. Tear it down. Why would this be here?
And it's so far adrift from the founding of our country. And when we look at the original 13 states, most of them had religion as part of their state constitutions,
right,
and kind of morality clauses as well. And so when people sit there and say, well, the United States was informed on that, it actually was, because you remember, it was the United States. The United States was created from the states, which the states already had their religious and morality clauses within their constitutions. And so to say that basically creates a blind eye. And the reality is that, was it 54 to the 55 signers of the Declaration of Independence basically were faith leaders themselves. And the reality is they assumed that the people themselves would be moral, and so they didn't have to put that in the Constitution. But apparently, when we fast forward 250 years, maybe we should have, because some of us have gone a little bit of adrift.
Yeah.
And,
well, I don't think our forefathers thought that we would eventually be having an argument that men can get pregnant. That's probably the one that they thought. That's why it wasn't on their bingo card, you know?
No, it wasn't on my bingo card. And if you rewind 20 years, it was just like, this is not, even at the University of Minnesota during the early 90s, this was not a thing. It did not exist.
Right.
And that was a liberal college. Yeah, it was common sense. It's like, okay, so where this poison started coming into our society, we need to investigate that and stop it. And even when I hear these testimonies of when it is okay, what's the appropriate age to have drag queen story hour in our schools, and you have these administrators that can't actually give you an age gap because they literally are saying, well, it's good for everyone.
Right.
No,
it's not. Nobody wants this shit.
Yeah. And then the library association too. It's like, holy cow.
Yeah. I just don't understand how, there's good and evil, and there's always the right and wrong. Like, to have a common, and I think that's really one of those things that I started realizing is, like, where do people's values come from? If your values come from, what you learned in the kindergarten classroom when you were a kid, and faith wasn't really a big part of it, you're probably going to be really confused. But people that have that stronger faith, know that Jesus saved all of us, those are the people with that faith. I find, those values, people with those values, I'm going to get along with, because they understand right from wrong. And it's kind of one of those things where you think most people understand it, but clearly today's Democrats do not. They voting for Graham Plattner, real winner that guy is.
And let's also break it down in another way. If we think about government at its base level, even communists would agree that one of the number one things when we look at government is it wants to survive in perpetuity, right? And so would a government give advantages to married couples that will have children?
Right.
So even communists understand that gays aren't going to help their procreation.
Right.
Transgenders are probably not going to help in their population growth. So the reality is that they're going to give tax benefits and certain benefits to people who are willing to procreate to create future taxpayers and workers to make sure that their government can survive in perpetuity. That's a gross way to think of it,
Right.
but that is a non-Christian argument that can be used
Right.
when you look at government in itself. And so this is why you have socialist governments and other governments around the world that don't recognize any type of gay rights or transgenderism because of this base ethos.
Right.
So, and that's without religion. So now when we put religion back into it, it gives us the descriptions within the Bible to
Right.
basically say, yeah, this isn't right, it's gross, and
Right.
it's not productive, right?
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
so, and just because it doesn't have the word homosexual in it doesn't mean that the Bible didn't explicitly describe what was going on.
Right.
And so some of these lies that the devil tries to basically put into our lexicon in the political discussions that the left uses in America is so far off base. And so this is why it's so important to really get into your Bible, but also listen to the pastors who are on the front line, but also activists. And I think this is where I go back to Charlie Kirk. I encourage everyone, you've got to listen to Charlie Kirk. You've got to listen to some of these other pastors out there, because there was so much wisdom there that really helps break down the relationship between Christ and where we are as a country, and how to argue and articulate
where we are now. No, I agree.
Right, and how to articulate and to protect your heart from that evil, and to not slip into that realm. And so the Democrats want control of the government so that they can take over your lives and be just as much interested in your life as you are. Whereas the Republicans just want to leave you alone and allow you to develop that relationship with Christ through those struggles, and then work with your community to basically solve those problems.
Amen. Amen. Well, I appreciate you coming on this Saturday. It's been great, and thank you so much. God bless you, and thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much. Stay awesome, everyone. And if you can support the campaign over at MikeLindellGov.com, please do so. This election is so important in so many states. Please start supporting your candidates, whether you're walking with them in parades, telling your neighbors about your favorite candidates, donating money, whatever you can do, even spreading the message on social media. Please do.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you again. You are the man. God bless you. Keep the faith. Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you so much. Stay awesome.
All right, man. All right. Well, that was Rick Weible, the man, the myth, the legend. He, really breaks it down for all of us. I think the whole thing just amazing. What we just saw in California, and the election process that we see here in the United States. How we really need to come back to Christ. We need people to start doing the right things, and so keep the faith, keep fighting the good fight. But like Rick just said, get out there and support your faith leaders. Get out there and, talk about Jesus. Talk about the Republican Party. Talk about the good things that we're doing. And then talk about the nut jobs and the evilness that is the Democrat Party. People need to see the difference in what is going on right now in this country. And I want to thank everybody for coming out this Saturday, listening to the GRIMALDI podcast. We will be back next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Keep the faith. God bless. And keep the faith. Get out there, talk shit to a liberal today.